Hi everybody, this video is sponsored by a contribution from Anonymous. I was born in Trenton, New Jersey in 1988. My mother sent me away to Peru when I was just a few months old. When I got older, around 8 or 9, I remember when I asked her why. She said some bullshit about she couldn't take care of me because I was the youngest, so I cried the most and needed the most attention, and that she was suffering from some postpartum, and that she was afraid to hurt me because she had all three of us back to back. Basically, we were about to drive her insane if she didn't do something about it fast. My older sisters were pretty close to my age. We were all still babies. At the time, the oldest was 3 and the middle was 1. They too at that age needed lots of attention, but I guess 3 is a crowd, like they say, right? So she needed to temporarily get rid of me before she loses her shit. That was her excuse, and she wanted to make it seem like I should feel sorry for her, if anything, because according to her, she did what she could to make do despite the ordeal she was in, and it was a tough choice she had to make. She also said my father was dealing in the streets for extra income, and she was uncomfortable with that and worried about the safety of her kids. That still didn't add up. Then why didn't she send us all to Peru? Then she said she only saved up enough money to send to her sisters, my aunts, to use it to take care of one child, not all three. So she chose me because I was the newborn. What the fuck? I wasn't satisfied with her answer, obviously, and she was looking for a real plausible answer. So I thought there was even one. I even asked her if she never wanted to have me to begin with. Basically, I felt something was missing there. She is not completely honest with me. She sent me off to Peru and then came back and took my sisters with her from New Jersey and moved to Texas to temporarily get away from my father. My father, once she told me she never consulted with him before sending me off to Peru. It was done behind his back, which had infuriated him, but not enough to motivate him to go out there and take me back until I turned 4. Once I started showing that I had the ability to make sense of things and wasn't going to let go of the topic by accepting her bullshit answer, that that was when she began her narc rage and started to flip the whole thing on me and berate me, asking me why I'm talking about the past. I should be grateful I have a family when compared to the hundreds of children in rural parts of Peru who are homeless and were actually abandoned by their drug addict parents. That I just wanted to make her feel like shit, etc., etc., etc. Then she proceeded to put the whole family against me. Insult to injury was the game she played. Nothing was her fault as the adult that she is. She would make the family attack me. That's when she would appoint my other siblings to jump down my throat, telling me I should stop trying to hurt our mother by reminding her about the past. Who the hell do I think I am? And I should stop trying to make her feel bad about it. She is upset, etc. My father would also jump in and attack me as well. How my mother would achieve this is by pestering the rest of the family, complaining about me, and will not stop until they had enough hearing her constant bitching. And so they'd go do her bidding just to shut her up. And because that's what mothers do as a resolution to a problem. Sarcasm. She acts like the victim all the time. Anyway, you get the point. So in turn, it fucked me up even more because not only did she traumatize me, severely kidnapping me from Peru at the age of 4, but it's all my fault. Of what? I don't know, but the animosity would always be directed at me by the family whenever I asked for clarifications of events that happened, why it happened, and my overall right to know. When I first met my mother, I believe it was about a few days away from my 4th birthday. My mother basically planned to finally come get me right when I turned 4. I remember crying to my aunts that I knew my mother is not here and I wanted my mother. I remember my aunt's sad faces as they pitied me, even said to me, "I am your mother," to make me feel better, but I said, "No, you're not." I just knew. I had this sixth sense that I knew none of them were my biological mother. So back when I was turning 4 within a few days, that's when I first met my mother. She walked up to me with either a piece of cracker or a lollipop, one of those. Like I'm an animal that can be easily won over by food and subtly grow affection by the person feeding me. She said, "Hey, I'm your mother. I'm here to pick you up," in Spanish with a fake enthusiastic expression on her face. I was stunned and my stomach sank. I had no idea who this strange lady is, and I didn't accept her candy. It was weird to know that your mother wasn't around, but once she showed up, you don't feel anything. But that's what happened. I was, if anything, scared of her and felt a pit in my stomach that this is not going to turn out well. As she was catching up with her siblings and the family was gathered around the table, conversing about packing my stuff and the whole process of having me go with my mother, I was telling them I don't want to go. I knew what they were talking about, but they would still treat me like I didn't know, saying to me, "You'll be fine, you won't go." I was not an idiot. I hated when they seemed to think that at the age of 4, you are still too unaware of your surroundings or the ability to remember and understand things. I knew what was going to happen when I was helpless. When the time came for my mother to take me away from the only home I knew, I obviously went ballistic. I did everything I could. I remember grabbing on skirts, shirts, clawing at the doorway. My aunts tried to comfort me, telling me everything will be okay, that she is my mother and she will take care of me. I watched the helpless looks on my aunts' faces as I got hauled out of the house. I cried nonstop all the way to the airport and flight home. I remember at the airport kicking and screaming at my mother to get her off me as she carried me in her arms. I remember her looking teary as I managed to hit her in the face for the second time. I thought she had some sort of conscience in her that what she did, she knew was beyond wrong. She would hold down my arms with her arms when she was carrying me to prevent me from using them again to hit her. I remember having so many mixed emotions: resentment, anger, confusion, and especially just this insurmountable feeling of betrayal from my aunts, who I entrusted with my basic needs at that age: love, care, and most of all, security. I am shocked to this day why no one arrested her at the airport, because she looked like she fucking kidnapped the child. I literally tried to run away from her. No one seemed to care, and she probably lied to the spectators, telling them I was having an epic tantrum or something. But seriously, I can never wrap my head around how no one even bat an eye, or was the least bit bothered to ask why the fuck the child looked so distressed beyond belief. She got away with it all. With my mother, I learned there are so many cunning ways, almost unimaginable, to abuse someone while at the same time their wrongdoings stay within the radar of normality or seemingly normal behavior that doesn't need intervention. Such as how she managed to fuck me up for the rest of my life by inflicting that trauma of kidnapping me while she was surrounded by all these witnesses everywhere. Or how she would constantly expose me and my sisters to hardcore adult situations, including death. I believe it was to desensitize us. What I mean by adult is stuff that children should not be exposed to at such a young age, like open adult fights about money issues, cheating, and contemplating divorce. My father coming home drunk, dead puppies, dead dogs, dying animals, not one time, not twice, but every fucking time. I remember when I first stepped foot into the house to my new family, I saw my sisters just stare at me weird. Even they were shocked and looked at my mother like I didn't know we had a third sister. So not only did the cunt just felt like bothering to get me back, but did not prepare the family to receive me. So all that awkwardness was weighed on my shoulders for me to deal with and maneuver through. That's when the bullying started. After all, I was like an intruder to them almost. My sisters were testing me. One time they were chanting this song they made up on cue that they were taking turns pulling at my pigtails. One of my sisters were sitting to my left, the other to my right, and they were taking turns pulling my hair. I cried and asked them to stop. My mother came out and yelled at them to stop. I remember how my mother was testing us all out. I looked at her face. I was maybe 5 at the time, and I knew something was off about her, very off. Something psycho, vindictive, dark, and sinister. As an adult that I am now, I have more knowledge about the narcissistic family dynamic. I am finally able to put a name to certain events and the intentions behind it. And I learned that what she was doing was she was figuring out who to make the golden child and who to make the scapegoat. I remember she purposely put me on a pedestal one time, like when my sisters would mess with me. She would spank them, then separate me and sit me on a nice big chair and give me my favorite toys, then tell them to leave me alone. But when she did that, I showed signs that I liked to share and be generous. I showed that I did not want to be excluded as if I was so special, but I wanted to be liked and accepted. I showed signs of a normal child who had compassion, who wanted to belong. That's when she immediately shifted to making my other sister, the middle one, the golden child, and she made me the scapegoat. My middle sister is the most sensitive one, to be honest, in my opinion. She was very expressive, emotional, and attached, especially when things go wrong, despite being the one who went through the extreme trauma, and she didn't. She would show signs that she is very much dependent on her mother's praises, constant reassurance, therefore easily manipulated, so that is why my mother picked on her. And it wasn't long before my middle sister quickly became a narc herself. My mother knew that ultimately I will grow older and start asking questions wanting answers as to the events that took place. But by then, she has the whole family trained or brainwashed to attack me, dismiss me, treat me like the enemy, and ridicule me when I do, and that's what happened. All 3 sisters, me included, showed signs of abuse, the way we would fight, our problem-solving skills, or lack thereof, and how we deal with issues including death. It was obvious that we were a very dysfunctional family. Instead of banding together as siblings, we would play the triangulation game. Sometimes me and my sister Helene would link up. Sometimes me and my oldest sister Lorena would even sometimes my mainly oldest sister and I would link up against our mother. Sometimes our dysfunction couldn't always be concealed, as it would get very violent. But hey, we were living in the right neighborhood that will not blink an eye for all the craziness that sometimes can be overheard next door, because we lived in a trailer park in one of the most ghetto areas of Miami. I know exactly where you lived, too. Exactly where you lived. We were all right at home with the rest of the other nutcases in the city. So my mother said once that she wanted to get us away from our then dangerous father in dangerous neighborhood in New Jersey, but ended up moving us to Liberty City, one of the craziest crime-riddled areas of Miami. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Back to dead animals. I'll give you a few examples, at least from the ones that stood out most that I can remember clearly, for that matter, and that scarred me for life. Every time the family gets a new dog to replace the old one that died, that dog would not last with us a few years before it dies, and then we just get another one. The first time I experienced the death of a dog had to be the worst of all other deaths. It was the first pet the family had. Mind you, I know and understand that death is part of life, and ultimately every child needs to at some point come to the realization, acceptance of it. But our experience wasn't normal, so the first pet we had was a female dog named Susie. She was constantly getting pregnant and having litters of puppies time after time. Some would be stillborn, born sick, and die within a week or so. Some make it a few weeks old to be given away to friends or neighbors, or sold by my dad to make money. And yes, they were all mutts. Ultimately, the constant breeding took a toll on her health. She definitely shows signs of distress and physical wear down. Sagging teats and a dull coat being some of the most obvious. She was fed bones as a main meal, cooked bones with the occasional chicken and rice. She was being used by my piece of shit parents. They didn't take decent care of her otherwise, and she would have been spayed. Or otherwise, she would have been spayed the first thing when they got her. But no, my mother was more enamored by cute puppies and attention she would get by neighbors and the family. So she kept letting her mate, oh, not at least mate with her healthy dog. No, my mother would just let her loose, acting like she was tired to keep her within the confinement of the gate surrounding the front porch. But oops, somehow she managed to escape. And there she goes, pregnant by just another street dog of any breed, with who knows what diseases they might have carried and transmitted to her. Sometimes Susie would come back with worms. Whenever Susie would accidentally pee herself in the living room, or does something that's fucking distressed dogs does with a body that took a beating from constantly giving birth, my father would get mad, chase her under the couch where she would hide. She would growl and bark at him as he would poke at her. Yes, poke at her with the end of a broomstick, hitting her tender parts like her teats, which were probably tender and sore from the puppy suckling. But no, my father needed to teach her a lesson, not to make a mess of the living room. I pleaded with my father not to hit her like that, but he kept going. My cunt mother pretending to act like she cared. The most she would tell him is stop, but not in a genuine way, or like she meant it. More like annoyed when he takes things too far in hitting her. All I could do was stand there in tears, watching my father brutalize Susie, hearing her yelps. When he was done, I would sometimes hear her wheeze. Other times I would see a small trail of a blood stain on the living room floor. My sisters would say resentfully, he probably hit her too hard. Now on to the puppies. Dead puppies became almost the norm, and being exposed to them with no emotion from my parents, especially my mother. As I said before, a lot of the puppies would be born sick with genetic illnesses, even parasites. One time my father even tried to care for one sick puppy that he brought home again, from God knows where. So we force fed him some warm soup, yes, human soup, from a nasal fucking aspirator. I watched as my father would not take it easy and let the puppy swallow what he already had in his mouth before he squirts another more to the point it will gush through his nose. My father was basically drowning him. I asked him to please slow down, you're drowning him. He said, shut up and go back inside the house. I know what I'm doing. I was maybe 7 or 8. I watched as he practically killed him, but said he tried to help him, but it was no use. By the time my father was done, the puppy was convulsing violently, then stopped breathing and dies instantly before my eyes. Another time it was simply just a typical day of coming home from school. I was probably 9, only to find the entire litter of puppies Susie recently had all laid on the floor dead. Most of them had their mouths open, and some seed looking weird things, that apparently looked like they vomited out before dying. My mother just standing there emotionless. As always, she said to me, I don't know what happened. They probably got a hold of that drywall and ate it and got poisoned by it. There was loose drywall in areas of our living room. The most fucked up thing of it all is why the fuck she did not pick them up and place them in a box before the kids come home to find out. Again, no filter or sensitivity from my mother, just straight coldness. Also, out of all the places they could have died, how curious that they all seem to have picked the stairway to die together, laying close to one another. I think my mother purposely placed them there, honestly. Also, they looked kind of wet from what I remembered. Perhaps they were drowned instead. I will never know. I hated my mother with a passion as I learned how sick and twisted she really is. I then grew to hate my father for knowing what she did and continued doing. And just stood there by the sidelines, then realizing that my father was just as twisted as my mother, if not worse. As I look back on these memories, gaining new perspectives. When my mother and I had fights, the most he would say and do is yell at her to stop and calm down. But when she would have fits of rage and start wailing on me, but he never puts his hand on her or pry her off me, like I always hope he would do one day, like a real man, a real father with balls who isn't afraid to intervene and who really cares about the welfare of his kids. He would be afraid that he would be that afraid of her. My mother was terrorizing my father, even though he too was not a saint and did some horrible things when he was younger. My mother always had this sick thing that she enjoyed, my mother always had this sick thing she enjoyed doing, that is, pick up a subject to argue to me about, and if I disagree or had an opinion, she will smack me cold across the face. And when I stopped talking back and just agreeing with her, that was not enough for her. She will take it to the next level. She basically would enrage me, and once I get enraged and give a reaction, she would use that against me, and as an excuse to hit me again and just treat me like straight up garbage. The hate and disgust in her face is something of another world when she gets like that. The next step after that is the family is home, and she would make a spectacle, complain to the family about what happened and what I did and how disrespectful and defiant I was, because wailing at me to teach me a lesson wasn't enough for her. She needs a whole family to now jump in my throat and attack me. Flying monkeys. So I had to sit there in the living room and deal with everyone pointing the finger at me. I had nowhere to go most of the times when this happens. Part of the reason why I have so much repressed anger, tension, and negative energy in me to this day, because I was forced to drown it all and also not to express how I truly felt about abnormal behavior of my mother, nor any outlet. Everything was turned into a huge deal, a scandal. That was how she got her sick narc fix. She didn't stop until I was broken in tears and extreme distress. On top of that, nowhere to go. That's when she gives out that look of satisfaction after she really achieved that climax. Not to mention the cut was just so too cheap to install AC in this hot-ass humid city that is Miami, where temperatures can get almost 109. Whatever argument anyone has to get home, anyone can get almost unbearable because the heat added to the stress. She would seem perfectly fine with the fan turned on low or medium while baking in the oven called the living room, while she would hum to herself, knitting or sewing or whatever her incendiary hobby she enjoyed doing while sitting on her fat ass. That's how I grew up. Oh, and I believe she picked living in the crazy ghetto neighborhood that way because she had an excuse to keep mostly indoors. I rarely got exercise, especially into my teen years. Again, I was a very sedentary lifestyle. I typically had two choices. That is, watching boring local TV or stare at my cunt mother as she is in her little world knitting, or I go to my hot ass room and listen to the radio music. That was me growing up. When I was a kid, I had fevers, and it would get so bad sometimes I would lose touch with reality and hallucinate. I would have severe panic attacks, nightmares, and see my hands grow huge like two balloons or something weird like that. Again, this is hallucinated, so I freak out every time. I would either scream and cry, fighting off the sheets that in my dream that is a huge blob that wanted to suffocate me, or I run out of my bedroom to the living room, terrified, begging someone to help me. My father one time came to my rescue when I had one of those nightmares, hallucinations, psychotic episodes, and he hugged me. I would hear my mother in the hallway telling him, "She's just being a brat. I already taught her next time she goes through this to tell herself it's not real and to self-calm. What is her problem?" Yes, the fucking cunt who caused all this to me leaves me to not only deal with it as if I even knew how at that age, but something is very wrong with me, why I am not normal. Those were just one of those rare moments that my father stood up for me, but that would never make up for the fact that most part, 99% of the time, I was on my own at the mercy of my cunt mother and my flying monkey siblings, who ultimately began enjoying making me the scapegoat. I also blame my high temperatures when I get sick on the fact that again, the cheap fucking bitch refused to have an AC installed. That's probably why the temp got too high and I started acting crazy. Let's not forget that when my father wasn't around and I wasn't sick, if I ended up having another episode and run into the living room, my dear mother just does what any normal mother would do. She would pimp smack the lights out of me just to snap me out of it. She would complain, as always saying, "What the hell is wrong with you? You're getting too old for this. You need to calm down, or I will smack you." And she smacked me so hard I fell on the couch where I was standing as I would. And she smacked me so hard I fell on the couch where I was standing by, and she was ready to give me another before my oldest sister was looking at my mother with disbelief at how savage and medieval she tends to behave. I forgot what she told her. I think it was something in the lines of "Stop hitting me, that won't work." I had to plead someone in the family to have some compassion whenever this happens to me. Like I remember pleading to my oldest sister to count down from 10 when she hugs me. She barely hugged me. She looked more weirded out than understanding and compassionate of me. That is how I knew my mother did an excellent job in desensitizing them from having compassion. I was helpless. Eventually, those psychotic episodes slowly subsided as I got older, and when I got sick, it was normal. It was a normal way people get sick. I also believe my mother would overdose me NyQuil, which contains a lot of alcohol. So just mix alcohol, which makes your body heat up, with no AC and not even air circulation, and you get it. You get it, but apparently she didn't, or she did, and this was just another one of her sick ways to again get her supply. Making a spectacle, making me a circus freak to the family was her favorite thing to do. The other thing NyQuil will do is give you fucked up dreams. They put you in this deep sleep that you can't wake up from, and gives you fucked up dreams. What you were doing were having night terrors and sleepwalking, something I've done. I will take off and start running in my sleep for no reason. I did it a lot as a kid. You don't hit somebody. And the NyQuil was adding to that. As I entered grade school, I remember how she would make fun of my assignments whenever I bring home a complicated graded assignment. Sometimes she would make the most cruel jokes about it. For example, and this one stood out because I remember perfectly well 90% of it. I was in second grade. I came home from school, and I remember being afraid of showing her my recent assignment because I knew she was very critical. So I remembered her already being afraid of her. I walked up to her to hand her the essay. The teacher told us to do that is to pick a topic about anything and make 2 paragraphs of it. My mother, who can barely speak or read English, decided to make fun of my handwriting and my grammar, which was in English. My middle sister, who's the loyal, the one who's loyal to my mother, she would turn against anyone just to be on her good side. She was a very evil bitch. She had this look on her face that she couldn't wait for what my mother was going to do. By the way, her name is Helene. So anyway, Helene happily served my mother as translator to what I wrote. My mother could barely pronounce sentences. The mission of my mother was supposedly to make sure I am spelling right and conforming coherent sentences. The irony. Do you think this might be the reason why you had so much problem writing to me to begin with? There's nothing wrong with the way you write. You write perfectly. This is why. And Charlene's Dominican mother, who can barely speak or write English, used to do the exact same fucking thing. Because she was jealous of it. She was jealous of it. She used to do the same thing to it. To this point, she still can't. She still can't write. The irony, I know. How does she make sure to do that? To laugh and poke errors, that was very helpful. That was her helpful way. Again, English technically was my second language, but I learned very fast. However, I did struggle making coherent sentences early in my childhood. My mother enjoyed making fun of my spelling errors and tapped me on the head with paper as a threat that I better get my act together and learn to read and write English properly, or I would probably get whooped the next time. She then proceeded, with the help of Helene, to read aloud the sentences I made and laugh again and ridicule the spelling errors. The topic I chose was to talk about my dog. I misspelled 2 words in a sentence by conjoining them into a word that was not in the dictionary, at least in the English dictionary. It was sangre in Spanish. Sangre means blood. I was meaning to spell out so angry. The dog got so angry and gave him a bone to make him happy, but instead the dog got sangry. She read that and said the dog got sangry. Then she burst out laughing along with my sister. I believe the whole family was there in the living room, as a matter of fact, laughing at me. I tried to laugh along because it seems like it's normal to be ridiculed before everyone, apparently, because nobody is telling my mother she's being an evil cunt, so I thought something must be wrong with me. I need to show them I can take a joke. But as much as I faked laughter, I couldn't hold back my tears and told my mother that I really tried and please stop making fun of me. She refused, saying that that's what I get for not paying enough attention in class. Never has it occurred to my savage family that if I am having trouble paying attention in class, maybe it was the result of being abruptly separated from my primary caregivers, who were then my aunts. As a result, I developed learning issues along with social anxiety, shyness, depression, and serious trust issues. I was quiet and reserved, which made it even worse because then I was bullied. But no, it was all my fault, all my responsibility. I still have a problem, and there was no excuse, no cause or excuse for it. I was just naturally born with the bad habit of not wanting to learn and pay attention, of being defiant towards my mother. My mother and I never bonded to begin with because she didn't care about bonding. I remember when I was 4, I wanted to nurse from her, even though I was too old to nurse. It was my way of trying to bond. I grabbed for her left boob to start suckling, and she was repulsed and scolded me, saying I am way too old to do that. Pulled my hands off her. Perhaps I assumed it was okay because my aunts, someone who also had children, were probably nursing me well through my toddler years, so I didn't see it as abnormal. I cried and I just wanted to bond in some way. I was so distressed and suffering separation anxiety. I literally had to ask her to hug me, and she reluctantly did so to shut me up to keep me from crying. That was the most bonding we did in the first year of getting to know my mother. She was cold, very cold to me for the most part. By the age of 6 is when I learned new ways to deal with stress, and this is something that I researched about as well as I got older. At first, I was disgusted at myself for thinking back and think to myself, no kid should be doing that so young. I learned that I can masturbate. I discovered my sexual areas and started playing with myself. Child masturbation is normal according to most experts, but they also say too much or frequent could be a sign of sexual abuse. I wouldn't put it past my disgusting perverted uncle that my aunts sometimes would put me in the care of, that he probably sexually molested me. This is the age when I also learned to manually pluck out my scalp hair, and it would be from specific areas. It's a sensation you can't explain that when you get when you pull and once the hair is yanked off you, the feeling of relief from whatever is causing you anxiety and the urge to pull out. That was how I learned to self-soothe, along with the nail biting as well. That, for the most part, was my way of dealing with the high stress by extremely toxic and dysfunctional family dynamic, along with intense heat and no AC at many times. Nowhere to go after an argument to get fresh air. No one to talk to because my cunt mother was so controlling. I was limited as to where to go to reflect on things. My mother basically prevented me from learning healthy boundaries. Instead, after a fight, she loved basking and lingering in the tension in the air and negative energy that she caused after making me cry and put me in a state of extreme psychological distress. All I could do was go to my room and listen to the radio with the fan turned on, blowing hot air at me to cry out. There was never really a resolution to a problem, just explosive fights. That was my life. It was psychological warfare. I see how bad it screwed me up as I became an adult and realized how much I needed to learn basic communication and problem-solving skills. I am the last one to know how to diffuse tense situations. I lacked diplomacy when addressing an issue and things like that. Also, let's not forget that my mother would notice those flaws in me. She would, of course, use it against me. She would critique and say things like, you could try to be less brash and use tactic. Yeah, suddenly my mother knows how to be more tactful and less savage when it comes to addressing problems, and she is lecturing me about it. Go figure how that makes sense, but the point is, she again blames me, points the finger at my flaws caused by her, and in turn, it just added to my feelings of inadequacy, my self-esteem, if I had any left, was just constantly beaten down by this cunt. I can never do anything right, according to the family. When my mother caught wind of what I would do at night behind closed doors, touch myself, she flips out at me, whacks me with the bed sheets, and then what does she do to get to the bottom of the weird abnormal? What does she do to get to the bottom of a weird abnormal behavior a child is exhibiting? What any loving, caring mother would do. Again, run to where my couch potato family is basking in their sweat from the hot sauna that is called our living room and tell everyone what a disgusting thing I was doing. I was so embarrassed, words cannot describe. When she found out about my bald spots, same thing. She goes on and complains to the rest of the family, asking where did I get that from. At first I lied and told her it was probably an infection that I caught from playing outside. My mother agreed and said she had a bald spot once too from an infection, and her mother used a medicated soap to cure it. So she went ahead and started rubbing my scalp with medicated soap. It obviously didn't work because it wasn't an infection and I kept pulling. It wasn't long before I realized that I was the one causing the bald spots. So I admit to her what was really the cause. She went ballistic and spanked me and warned me not to do it again or I would keep getting spankings. I tried so hard to keep my hands off myself, but pull and not pull, but failed. The urge was too strong to resist, and it was part of my ritual, again, to calm myself from stressful situations. Now I can't even do that. As far as masturbation, I would also have strong urges to do that as well. My mother told me one time, I knew you were going to turn out the most barefaced, flirty of the three because when you were a baby and I would change your diapers, you couldn't wait to spread your legs as far and wide with a big smile so I could put powder on you. You had no shame. Your other two siblings, in contrary, they were calmer when getting changed. They weren't that enthusiastic, but you were very excited and happy to spread your legs. Again, I was made to feel like a mistake. The weird one who only caused everyone trouble, and my mother may not have directly said she wished I wasn't born, but she would leave hints here and there, and that's what she was trying to let me know. I was not part of the family. I was just being tolerated. I've talked to this girl before, so I know her pretty well. Let me tell you why you were sent away, first of all. And the answer lies in the pets. Your father has an obsession with seeing things die. That's why you were sent away. He likes seeing things die and torture them. The puppies, the drowning, all of it. Watching them suffer, watching them die. Unfortunately, this is another thing that is all too common in Latino culture, as Charlene will tell you. Her mother killed pets, her father killed pets, they killed kittens, they poisoned them to watch them die. It's a power and a control. The making fun of the writing, all that stuff is all stuff Charlene went through. Same exact shit. And it comes from, a lot of it is wrapped up in the Latino culture. Not saying all Latinos are narcissists, but this is, the heat, the air conditioning. Like, I know what that's like, believe me. The NyQuil is what was causing your night terrors, at least it was contributing it. And when you pull your hair out like that, there is a disease called for it. I don't name for it. I don't know what it is. That is an actual neurological problem. I will tell you all, I have seen the effects of what these people have done to this girl. And it's traumatizing. And she's traumatized, and she don't know where she's going. She's been beaten by her parents, by her siblings, gaslighted in the worst possible way, experienced death, destruction, just to be used as a pawn. You were sent to Peru because your father, he was afraid someone was going to die. You were too young, like the puppies. And remember how your mother greeted you at 4 years old? like a puppy, like a dog. You were nothing more than another pet to them. But she was smart enough to know we can't get away with killing her. And now this guy, this sick fuck's got this thing with these dogs that he likes watching them die. And I think she might even have a little bit of it too, obviously. Because how did the puppies get wet? They were in the living room. They like drowning dogs. This is a popular thing. You need a trauma. You need more than a therapist. You need a trauma therapist. You need somebody who can help you with your trauma and all of this, because it is a lot to process. You got a lot of things going on, a lot to process, and you know, we both know you're not handling it very well. You have extreme trust issues, and it affects your personal life, your relationships, and your work life. And understand what happened to you here. These people, after reading all this, like, I already knew your parents were shit, but this just never again with these people, any of them, all of it, the gaslighting, the planned gaslighting, the humiliation. Who the hell is she to make fun of your English? That's the same thing Charlene's mother loved. Anything would just pick it apart and make fun of it, and then get her two dumb brothers, and they are dumb, joining in the party, and it just will destroy you. Destroy you. So, thank you again for your support and your story. I am sorry it took so long to get to it with everything that's been going on, but I'm glad you sent it to me. I'm glad I got through it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you know what to do with the PayPal link in the description box. I'll have the video right back to you. This is Ollie Matthews. Thanks for watching. See you all again soon. Bye.